We're really glad to see you guys out for the painting lecture series. Yes! This is the first in the lectures of 3 people we're going to be having from the painting program. This semester we're going to have Robert Bordeaux on March 7th, and we're going to have Hayal Bozanti next Wednesday night. Those are our 3 big lectures this semester. My name is Kim Ano, and I'm the chairman of the painting program. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Rebecca Morris tonight, who's going to be showing us her work. I want to read something that Rebecca wrote, which we all saw on the internet, and we were very excited about it, and it's called the Manifesto for Abstractionists and Friends of the Non-Objective. Be a force, don't shoot blanks. Black and brown, that shit is the future. Triangles are your friend. Don't pretend you don't work hard. When in doubt, spray paint it gold. Perverse formalism is your god. You are greased lightning. Build your camera, no, bring your camera everywhere. I like build your camera everywhere. Never stop looking at macrame, ceramics, super graphics, and suprematism. Make work that is so secret, so fantastic, so dramatically old school, new school, that it looks like it was found in a shed, locked up since the 1940s. Wake up early, fear death. Whip out the masterpieces. Be out for blood. You are the master of your own universe. Abstraction never left, motherfuckers. If you can't stop, don't stop. Strive for deeper structure. Fight monomania. Campaign against the literal. Abstraction forever. That's Rebecca Morris. That's your clue to go, woo! Oh. Rebecca was also, I wanted to say, Rebecca got her MFA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she was a student of our very own Steve Beale. So I wanted to mention that. And she has other friends here from Chicago, too, that are sitting with us tonight, so that's exciting. Some things about Rebecca. She is having some upcoming shows at Harris Lieberman Gallery in New York. She's doing a show called Works on Paper, and she's shown there for several years. I like this one title of one show that she was in 2006, Straight to Hell, Samson Projects in Boston. That must have been a great show. She's also going to be in a group show in Berlin at Gallery Barbara Weiss. She's had some solo shows there before. She also is in a group show at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago called Phantom Limb. I can be in the best titled shows. That's really great. So, Rebecca is a Guggenheim Fellow, right? Yes. And she currently is living in Los Angeles, and she's teaching at Pasadena City College, which has an amazing art department, if you don't know. And she has shown in galleries as Karen Lovegrove in Los Angeles, and also the Renaissance Society, right? And Hamza Walker wrote something about your work. So I was looking at your work the other day, and I just thought of some words that associated with that, and that is fragments, seeing, sparkle, come back, vestiges. These are just some words that I associated with your work. Anyway, Rebecca Morris, thank you for coming, please.
Hi, thank you for having me. So this is a painting. I'm just going to start the lecture at this point. This is the year 2002, but I got out of school, got my master's in 1994, so there's a body of work before this, but I just kind of start here. I think it's like a good talking point painting. This was a piece, it's smaller. I think it's around 30 by 30 inches. And I was working and working and working on it, and I couldn't get it to look right. it had color problems, it had texture problems, it was just full of problems. Normally I just throw something away when it's not working. I don't need to feel like a champion and work on it for like 7 years. I think it's fine to give up, but for whatever reason I decided I wasn't going to give up on this one. And then one day I had this idea, oh, I'll just spray paint it gold. And that really solved all the problems, and it was great, and it was really easy, So, I think sometimes with painting, there are really hard problems to solve, and every once in a while, there's a really easy solution, and that's a beautiful moment when you can find that. So, let's see. This was my studio around that time. These are 2 paintings in progress. And again, I'm just going to keep talking about some paintings that didn't work, because I actually think that's sometimes more interesting than the paintings that do work. And I also think it's easier to explain why something doesn't work than to explain why something does work. So the painting on the right, which has got that white spray painted stuff on it, I've used grids a lot in my paintings, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna change the grid. I'm not gonna make this perfect kind of cross-haired grid. I'm gonna have all the points, access points, skewed. I thought this was a great idea, and then I realized that it just looked like a brick wall. And was not comfortable with how literal it looked, and that it looked like a brick wall, and that was all that it looked like. And because of its size, it just was a stand-in, like a bad school play backdrop. So I thought, okay, well, what the next thing I did was, I think I just took some paint and threw it at the surface. Also a really bad idea, because now I just look like monkeys had attacked like a brick wall. So it was really just not a good painting. But again, it's big. I didn't want to restretch it. I was lazy. And so, and this is I don't know what year this is, 2003. So the previous year I'd spray painted that painting gold. So as a joke, I was like, haha, I'll spray paint it gold. Then I was like, well, you can't do that again. So I was like, oh, I'll do silver. So that's what I did. And I'll show you what it looked like finished in a moment. And I deemed it successful. And then the one on the left is a painting in progress, and it's a very dark gray poured ground with spray painted kind of long skinny rectangles. And this is how I made it. I make most of my paintings on the floor, and I'm not a precisionist. That's boring to me, and I think that I'm not a lazy person, but I am a lazy person. And so I would just rip out this sheet of this paper I had, and it was paper that was not acid free, so it was yellowing a lot, so I felt like I couldn't really use it. So I just ripped it out and kind of made this negative space alleyway, and then the paper was flimsy, so I used the spray can paint cans that I wasn't using to spray with, and those held it down. And then I sprayed those shapes. So it's there's no tape, it's not high tech, there's no masking, that's all cut out and pre-done, there's no computer. It's very DIY, in the moment, in my studio. And that's sort of how I work. And what was nice about this technique was that there were some interesting areas of overspray that I hadn't realized would happen, and those tend to be some of my most favorite parts of this painting. And again, I'll show you a finished version of this later. So that's the spray painted silver painting. And ironically, I had an opportunity to show at a place with a wall like this. And it was just really weird. And this is the Santa Monica Museum in Los Angeles, and they gave me a solo show there in 2003, 2004. It was in their project room, and they had this room. I mean, it's totally horrible. And they told me about it, and I was excited, and then I said, well, when are you going to drywall the walls? And they're like, well, we're not, actually. So I was like, oh, wow. But, you know, I just, whatever, I mean, I figured I'll just hang them on the concrete wall. And I think one thing I really learned from this is that, number one, geometric abstraction is just like architecture proof. And then I realized that my paintings are gritty and tough enough that they can really I think, successfully battle architecture. Really weird, funky spaces. And you know, when you're a younger artist, you usually are showing in weird places, so you get kind of used to seeing your work in environments that are combative. So later when I showed this in the survey show I had at the Renaissance Society, it was like in this gorgeous space. Really freaked me out because I thought, oh my God, my work looks so handsome, and I wasn't used to seeing it like really looking sophisticated. So I was more used to seeing my work being kind of aggressive and quirky. That's a detail. So that was that, you know, one of those strange blobs I threw on there. I had this really great opportunity to live in Europe, in Germany, for almost a year. I lived in Stuttgart and also in Berlin. And it's sort of funny, my boyfriend at the time, well, actually my boyfriend at the time and I both applied to the residency. He was a musician and I was a painter, and he got in and I didn't. But we both got to go because they're so cool in Europe. They're like, oh, whoever your girlfriend is, she gets to come, and I got to live there for free, and they even gave me a studio. And in fact, I had a way better studio than the fellows, because the fellows had the studio up at the castle, and they didn't have room for me at the castle, so I was in town, which was way better, because I was around other people and I could take the bus every day and go to the grocery stores and the thrift stores and just be in the culture of Germany instead of in this remote, a little bit depressing castle, and you wouldn't leave all day and you'd just be with these other fellows who were great but also like in their own heads all the time. So this was my studio door, and it had an R on it already, so I felt that was a good sign. And then this was my studio there, and I started making these small shaped paintings, which was something I had wanted to do for a while, but I hadn't because I thought it was too blinky Palermo. But when I got to Germany and I went to the art supply store, like their Utrecht, they had like bins and bins and bins of small triangular and circular shaped panels that they were selling for like next to nothing, like bins and bins of them. And I thought, well, you know, give me a break. I'm not going to hold out now. Anybody can be making these. They're pre-made, and any Yahoo can come in and make a triangle painting. So I'm going to make a couple. So we started making them, and unfortunately, I think I just threw a lot of them out because I had to move back to LA. But they were very important, and I still sometimes make these smaller paintings. But this was a big breakthrough. And another important thing that happened when I was in Germany was that when I moved into the studio, there were all these huge sheets of cardboard because somebody who had done an architecture project in there before had used like tons of cardboard sheets, meters and meters of cardboard, and they just were left there. So I just started cutting it up, and I have always had a very active kind of drawing practice, or it's really more watercolor than drawing, but I call it drawing. And I just started doing it on the cardboard and cutting them up, and this was really a big breakthrough. So basically, Germany was awesome because nobody was paying attention to me. Nobody cared what I was doing. When they found out I was a painter, they would say things like, oh, we hear it's coming back. You know, which I was shocked about because I was so psyched. I was like, yeah, I'm going to move from LA and I'm going to be in Germany, like the seat of painting. And, you know, so I was psyched, and I traveled a lot. I went all over Germany, London, lots of different places, saw amazing work, and, you know, just was totally overstimulated to my heart's content. And then this is one of a collage. So this is sort of what those pieces looked like. And another one. Now this is one of the paintings from that time period. This is the beginning of the painting, and I'm just going to show you, I can't remember how many pictures I have of it, but in the lecture I will show you paintings as they evolve. I guess maybe it's boring, but I love looking at that and other people's work, just seeing choices. Like, I think that's what's so interesting about making art, especially painting, are choices. The ones that are made, the ones that aren't made, and I take pictures all the time of what's happening in my studio because I want to remember what I chose against. So this is, I mean, you can see the complete relationship between the collages and this painting starting. And This also was right before my Renaissance Society show, and I told them I was going to Europe, and so we made a deal. They would take 3 paintings that I made in Germany for my show. So that was kind of a lot of pressure, but because I only made 3. Stupid. But anyway, I think they all worked out, and this was one of them. And this painting, when it was, I'll talk more about it in a moment, but so there is at the Renaissance Society. And this is that really beautiful space I was referring to. They have this gleaming, polished floor, you know, this ceiling that is this grid, and it means the ceiling's really cool because it means they can build the walls any way they want to there. So each exhibition, it's 4,000 square open feet, and they can just completely customize every exhibition to whatever design the artist wants. So sometimes there are no walls, sometimes there's tons of walls, and when we were hanging the show, this was like a painting that felt, and I mean it still does, but especially at that moment, felt incredibly vital to me. And I wanted it in the show right away. And at the time, I thought this was like the craziest painting I ever made. I thought it was loud and obnoxious and cacophonous, and there were all these contrasting, opposing moments in it, and I was really loving that it was almost falling apart, but still holding together. And I sort of wanted it as a warning. So that anybody who came into the show, if they didn't like this, then they wouldn't waste any more time and they could just turn around and leave, so that you didn't have that person who's like, I just spent 2 hours looking at this terrible stuff. You know, I just have this right at the beginning. It was kind of like, so, and then, you know, in the picture you can see, I mean, something that I geek out on is like the triangulated shapes and the shapes and the architecture and the mirrored reflection. So this painting was also in a group show called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly here in San Francisco at New Langton. Like, I don't know, Pam Wilson curated it, but I don't remember. It was like 4 years ago, maybe? Yeah. 2007, yeah. I don't remember. So this painting has been in San Francisco. So this was when you walked into the show, that painting was on the right, and then this was sort of what faced you. This was the first view you had. When they asked me how I wanted the walls, I had no idea. I had no idea at all. I had seen lots of shows at the Renaissance Society when I had lived in Chicago, but and that's where I went to school, but I didn't know what I wanted. So I just told Suzanne, just pick something. So she and her architect friend decided that they would build all the walls symmetrically, which I don't think I would have ever thought to do that. And that's why it was so interesting to me. And this idea of symmetry has been really a big idea for me since this. It was doing this show that really underscored that I am actually completely crazy about symmetry. And my show, this show was 24 paintings from 1996 to 2005 or something. So that's 9 years of work, like when you're 25 to, 35 or something. So the arc of how much my work had changed was really major, from what was happening in the paintings to the scale of them. So to kind of make a show that hung together of all this really diverse work was a challenge. And I think having those symmetrical walls gave it an internal logic and structure that could house and contain all the variants that the paintings had. And this was an idea that I've continued to take with me in terms of compositional strategies. So the painting at the back that's dark to the left with those lines, that's the one I showed in my studio earlier. And the painting on the left that's brightly colored, I would say that was a very big breakthrough painting when I made it. I wanted to create a painting made of lots of parts, and it was made before this one. So this is sort of the precursor. Oh, I have a better picture of it coming. There it is. So this was like a big idea, how to combine all these things together, but the shapes themselves are organic. I think after doing all the collages, I started doing more of these sharp shapes, But originally, the idea came out of a kind of organic structure. And then there are these thicker areas of paint that sort of solder the shapes together. And then just to go back, this is another installation view. And I don't have more installation views. They're all TIFF files, and I need to get more organized. But this is just another view of the show. This is another view of the show. This is unfortunately a poor quality image, but that's the silver painting now in a beautiful cathedral-like environment, and it really freaked me out. So I put that dark painting next to it, hoping that that would kind of growl it down. And then this was another juxtaposition. It was really fun to hang the show because I got to contrast certain elements against each other. And you know, when you look at a painting like this, that's exactly what's happening inside the painting. So then it was really fun to do this inside the paintings and exterior to the paintings. And then this is another painting I made in Germany. And yeah, so this was spray painted. It was a kind of an underpainting with these washy strokes, and then I isolated the best parts of it and then spray painted over the kind of, I guess it's unclear if that's the positive or negative space, but there's a sprayed area, and that spray paint's just fantastic because it's German and they have different regulations on spray paint, so it's sort of better. And that's that smaller painting with the diagonal stripes. There was a long period of time when I didn't use color that much. When I was in graduate school, and this is work I don't have in the lecture, it was the early 90s, and there were a couple shows about women artists at the time. One of them was Marcia Tucker's Bad Girls show. And I remember thinking that was so fucking cool. And all the pink and all, you know, and so I started making these paintings that were really pink and girlish, but those, and that's what people talk about. The people would talk about that with the work, and of course they would. That's what you'd say about it. But I was really upset because for some reason I thought I could use that and use that language and those colors, but not have it be about being a woman. My bad. So I was like, okay, well, that's not what I'm interested in. So I just pulled, I tried to remove the confusing signifiers, which in that case was pretty much all the color. And so I consciously started working in color that was more abstract, less gender specific, like black, brown, or gray. Colors that are often deemed not even colors, they're sort of like, you put brown or gray in the background to make the red look really good. So I thought, well, let's skip the red and just get into the rainbow of blacks, browns, and grays. So when I started returning to color, I was still ambivalent about it. So I wanted a kind of something sharp about the color. And so sharp color to me was a neon or fluorescent palette or metallic. So again, something that was more difficult. And again, I think, in my mind at least, less gender specific. So this is a piece from after my Ren show, 2005, 2006. It's very large, and it's symmetrical. And it was a way, this I think was maybe the first symmetrical painting. And it was just a way to do all this crazy stuff compositionally and internally that balanced out the chaos. And so the opposite mirror shapes are almost similar to each other, but not quite, and that was kind of fun. Yeah. And then this is my studio in Los Angeles, and these are two pieces that I was working on. I guess this is 2006, which was, you know, a really great year for me painting-wise. A lot of people said after the survey show that I'd have a hard time painting, and they're like, oh, after a survey show, it's really difficult, and you can go through a tough time, so be prepared for it. And I don't know, I feel like I just lucked out, maybe because the survey show wasn't in the town I lived in. I think I had gone to Europe, and I was back, and I'd come back for the show and come back to LA, and I felt so inspired and galvanized by my travel. And I am someone who just loves traveling. I mean, I hate it, and I love it. I love going, I hate the airport, but I love the trip. And I've always found that travel is just so beneficial, and so I just felt like I was on a hot streak of being completely connected to my work and just a powerhouse. So this was that time. So these are 2 paintings in progress. The one on the right, you can see that I've sort of drawn out the plan. I don't do this anymore. I think I did it at first when it was too overwhelming for me to grasp it without doing that. Now I don't like to do it because I can handle it, and I like the uncertainty of planning it out as it goes, shape to shape, mark to mark, more than I like working within a set plan. And let's see. So this painting is that one on the left, and here it is finished. I love this picture because it's in the studio and you can see the wood floor, and I just like the way the lines in the painting go. And whenever I see this painting, I always tell this story, and it's actually not very helpful to understanding the painting, but when I was finishing the painting, at the very top right, you can see the gold line goes across and then it kind of misses, and the silver tucks up into it where it shouldn't. And that was because there was an earthquake when I was spraying the painting, and I ran out of the building, and it was late in the day, and then I was too freaked out to like deal with it, and I didn't get more spray paint, and I just said, forget it, it's done. Yeah. I don't know if it's really not noticeable. I don't think it makes a shred of difference. It's just when I see that painting, I'm compulsively have to say this story. I think I'm so terrified of earthquakes, and I didn't grow up in California, that I'm never going to get over it. And my building is terrifying in an earthquake. So, and then this is the painting that was on the other side of it with all the parts, you know, done. And I had this very cool German art critic by my studio, and he said that this painting looked like futurism meets Ziggy Stardust. And I thought that was so awesome that he said that. I mean, you know, it's just his point of view, but I just, both things, of course, I love. So, and this, you know, this is a painting that I really do just still love, and I mean, I would be perfectly happy if I could just make this painting over and over and over, I think. I haven't tried. I don't kind of want to, but part of me does just want to like make it again. There's sometimes when you make a painting that you really love, you just, it's sad to have the moment over. So here it is in Berlin. This was the first solo show I did with Barbara Weiss, and I had written the manifesto when I was in Germany, and then I titled the show after the manifesto. So it was called, actually, the show wasn't called Manifesto, it was called the second line of it, which was For Abstractionists and Friends of the Non-Objective. And the manifesto, I mean, I can talk more about that in the question period if people are interested, but I'll just say this. I had written it and I showed it to Hamza Walker, who's one of the curators at the Renaissance Society, and I had just written it for myself, and Hamza and I are very good old friends, so I showed it to him. Like, I would have shown him it anyway, like whether I was doing this show there or not. But I showed it to him, kind of just being like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. And he was like, oh my God, it's great, it's great. And I was like, I don't know. So he read it at my talk, and I had never really thought about reading it to anybody. And then I talked about it with Barbara, and I said, maybe we could make a poster. Maybe it'd be cool as a poster. And she said, well, why don't we just take an ad out in Art Forum? And I was like, oh, wow, that's maybe better than a poster. But then what happened with the ad in Art Forum for my show is that people kept ripping it out and putting it as a poster, and a lot of my friends or people I didn't even know were emailing, or, you know, I'd meet them and they'd be like, oh, I ripped your thing out of the Art Forum, and it was so flattering. And so when I had my next solo show, I said to the gallery, we're making it into a poster. And so we did, and I'll show you that in a moment. So these are nice. I was really happy with the installation of the show. I really liked the way the smaller paintings sort of punctuated the large ones, the scale between the pieces. You could look at the small paintings almost as little satellites that jutted out of the large paintings. Sometimes the shaped paintings are autonomous paintings. Sometimes they're made with scraps from larger works that don't work out. I think this is my first large circle painting. And when I was living in Germany, I I realized that I loved analytic cubism. You know, there's some art movements that, of course, you're very aware of, but they only resonate with you later. And I think one thing I'm consistently interested in is a sort of flatness of space, and then this sort of quasi-depth, and then an inability to tell which is the front or the back, or an ambiguity in the sense of space, but this kind of frontalism. And this is another symmetrical painting. This one's smaller, it's mid-size, it's probably like 60 by 60. I do like to change scales frequently because I find no matter how big the painting is, I can learn the space and I can kind of handle it. So if I only do really large paintings, it gets to be, I mean, I don't ever think making a painting is easy, but you can kind of, you know that space. So, you know, doing the smaller ones, you know, just making a small painting is actually very difficult. And then you think that's really hard, but actually what I've decided is maybe the mid-scale paintings are the worst, the hardest to make, because big has that imposing, larger-than-you power, small has intimate, precious, middle is just like personal confrontation, human-sized. Like, what do you do with that? You know, so I like to switch scales to keep myself on my toes. And the longer you work as an artist, the more I think you need to be working on keeping yourself on your toes. And I think that's the real, I think about this stuff way too much, but I think when you're sort of at the middle of your career, whatever that is, the idea of how to keep things new to yourself and challenging is probably, you've got your subject matter, you've got your style, you've got all that. I'm not using very good words to describe this, but you've got your licks. But how are you going to outdo yourself? How are you going to continue to push your work? How are you going to make sure your signature doesn't become trite and shallow? And how do you not look like you're knocking off your own paintings? So I think that's the kind of mid-career challenge. So one way I think about doing this is disrupting as many little things as I can do. Scale is a good one. Another symmetrical painting. And, you know, I don't use rulers or anything like that in my work. I just eyeball everything, and I do make these like tracing lines, and I don't cover them up because I don't think my work is about trying to hide how I'm making it. This is a group show from probably 2007, and it's a good friend of mine, Anna Sue Hoy, her sculpture with Sapporo beer cans, and then my large triangle painting in the background. And I just love this picture. I love painting and sculpture together. I think it's like the oldest, sexiest couple in art history. Just so great, and I'm just dying to stop doing painting shows, like where it's just tons of people paint. I want to do painting and sculpture shows. I'm dying. So this is another exhibition. I like to show the exhibition shots so you can see the scale of the work and how they interact with the architecture. So this was really kind of a stupid way to do it, but there's that large painting, and then these two, they're actually equilateral triangles, and I think they were about the same size, flanking it symmetrically, and it's just such a stupid idea, but I thought it looked great. And the space is crazy. Everything is white, the floor, the walls. It's like you're in some kind of sci-fi teleporter. I couldn't help but think that that was something to play with. So there's the poster, there's the poster, and then that was a large painting in that same show. And I still have that painting. I hold back work for myself. So this is one that I held back. It was in there, but it was actually not even ever for sale. It's not a work that didn't sell that then I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm keeping it. It was not for sale. And that's a very important thing that I do. I want to be in control of my own archive. So. So I'm just going to show you some kind of little studio shots of these triangle paintings. I have this wonderful brick wall, which I love having because, again, it's that kind of rough, great texture. And I do think my paintings have a lot of texture in them. Even when they're really flat and thin, there's still this kind of gravelly look to them. It's because I'm using oil paint, and when it thins out and terp, it doesn't ever, it granulates, and I think that's really interesting texture. So the brick wall is always a nice complement to that. But I have this beam that goes right against it. It's like a little totem pole, so it's really fun to hang these on them. And so these are just pictures I think I took with my camera. Just, you know, like a crappy camera. That's a better photograph. I don't think I'd ever hang them like this in an exhibition because it's too gimmicky, but in my studio I really enjoy it. That's one of my paintings at a friend's house. I think it's really exciting when you see artwork in domestic settings. I mean, it's actually, of course, it is wonderful to have your work purchased by a public collection. I mean, who's gonna lie and say that's not cool? And that means a ton of people are gonna see it, it's prestigious, the context is incredible. But there is something really, really charming and so fantastic about having your work in someone's home. That means that somebody has hung it there because they wanna live with it every single day. And if that's not the biggest compliment, I don't know what is. I mean, that is just, their objects collect around it, they live their lives around it. It's a beautiful thing. This is an example of two drawings, works on paper. I don't know when this is from, this last 4 years. These are 18 by 24. And I often pair things like this, kind of different, but I mean, they're not that different, but it's another one. And these are all like, I don't know, 15 by 11 or something. So this is much larger in this picture than it is in real life. And these are very different from the paintings. The paintings take a long time. The paintings are built, take sometimes 2 months to make a painting. These are done usually in a one-shot type of afternoon situation. Sometimes I might work on one over 2 days, but they're very spontaneous, very quick, intuitive, not planned. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what colors I'm going to start with. I have no preconceived ideas except just doing whatever I want in the moment, and it's a really nice foil to the paintings. Not that the paintings are super planned out either, but there's something about working in a water medium that just is about speed and spontaneity, and it's a really nice counterpoint to oil painting. So this is this triangle. So after doing those smaller shapes, I thought, well, maybe you should try a big one, you know? So this is the only one I've done, and I decided that I wasn't going to do any more. It was really hard, which was great. So this was the first go at it, which I decided I didn't like. So it was destroyed and restretched. And then I guess this is the top of the new version. And it's on the floor. Like I said, I paint on the floor, and the floor of my studio collects all kinds of really interesting residual paint marks when I make paintings. So at a certain point, like 8 or 9 years ago, I started rolling out canvas on the floor too to catch those drips. And I should have said this earlier, but some of the paintings I've already shown you are made from these sort of tarps. And I stretch them and then do something to them. So this painting is lying on a canvas tarp that's just on the floor kind of collecting stuff. So now it's upright and I'm checking it out. And there it is at another stage. Oh yeah, and there it is. I like this picture because it's crazy. It's against one of the tarps that had been on the floor for a long time, and every once in a while I have to pull the tarp up and check it out because it gets so, you can overdo it. So I guess I had this on the wall for a while and I was thinking about it, and I just leaned this one against it. It's like camouflaged in there. So here's the triangle painting. It's in a show in Switzerland. in St. Gallen in a painting show that I was in. It was called Ambigu was the name of the show. And this was an exciting show to be in. Mary Heilemann was also in the show, as well as Raoul de Keyser. And then this is that same triangle painting. I think this is it must be at an art fair. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe Basel. But I don't know, it's like just painting geek. I just like seeing the painting in different locations. Like, you know, like in that space with that floor and that door, and then here, I don't know, it's fun. And it's nice, it's next to different work. And then this room was sick. It was so beautiful. It was total Euro fantasy exhibition hall, Kunsthalle, freak out. It had the parquet floor, the massive skylight, the cornice, and then Mary Heilemann, Mary, Rebecca. So that was really exciting. And it was nice to feel like, you know, in that company. And then the other side of the wall was all Raoul de Keyser. So, you know, that was really nice. And then this is a smaller painting, and it's gold again, but different. And then this was my solo show in Germany in 2009, and it was called Shards and Sky Windows. And it's another angle of the show. This painting with the circle was the beginning of me starting to pull apart the paintings, to dissect my own stuff. Like this painting at the back, which I'll show you in a moment, is really busy. And I had wanted to make a painting that had all the colors that I knew shouldn't go together. So I made that painting to kind of satisfy this guilty pleasure. Aqua, green, you know, purple, pink, all these colors that were just seemed like a train wreck. And then, you know, and then doing these really complicated formalist pieces, I just wanted to pull out the parts. And so that painting there is like that. And then I wanted it to not be so busy. I wanted lightness. And I think after doing the large shaped triangle painting, I also was very interested in the shape of large shape, but I didn't want it to be a shaped canvas. It felt too wacko and too specific and too wrong. It wasn't right. I didn't connect with it. But so I thought I would just continue with a rectangle, but then inscribe the shape within the parameters of the rectangle. Kind of the rectangle or the square would then be a kind of framic container for the awkwardness. I guess I was afraid of going Elizabeth Murray, you know, and, you know, I deeply respect her work, but a lot of it is really problematic for me visually. I'm like, oh my God, it's too crazy, and very feminist in a way that sometimes makes me uncomfortable. But in that way, I have to say I'm deeply interested in my own comfort. So I could like talk about this for hours about like thinking about Elizabeth Murray's work. But anyways, I didn't want it to go down that kind of crazy road or this really funky is the word. I didn't want it to get funky. So the shaped canvas at that scale was just funky unless you're like Ellsworth Kelly. And I'm not Ellsworth Kelly. So then I had this is like a little installation moment that I'm leading you up to. And then this is a typical, this is like, you know, really complicated painting, took a long time, super challenging. Every move you make eliminates a possible move in the future. It's colors, so each time you add something in there, the whole thing could fall apart. So I enjoy doing them, but they're hard. So then that's the view. You had this crazy view with the two isosceles triangles exactly the same size at the back, and then these two equilateral triangles on either side of the doorway. And again, this wasn't pre-planned. I just happened to, we shipped those paintings there, and I thought this was kind of hilarious. Like people were like, oh, I'm afraid to go through that doorway. So that's the painting where I just wanted to put every wrong color together. And oh, another thing I had, you know, it's so funny when people come by your studio, they say these things and you remember them. And this art consultant guy was like, it's what did he say? Oh God, the feminine versus the female. So, and here's, my mom came to Berlin for this show and she kept trying to get me, you know how, I don't know if your parents do this, but mine do. They're really excited and they want you in front of the painting to take the picture. And so I had this great idea. I was gonna get my friend Karen in front of the picture because she actually looked really good with the painting because she had that, you know, she's got this total Berlin style, crazy, you know, patterns, thrift store clothes. And then her baby, who's got that perfect round head with the little pilot cap on. I was like, get them in the painting. And it's true, like I look at that, and that's perfect. So these shapes that are kind of, they're not cut into the painting, but they're masked. I save the mask shapes that I've used, and I was saving them for years and years. I didn't throw them away and I kept them, and then one day I realized that they were works on paper. So there they are. I think the one on the left is from this painting. Yeah, it is. That shape with the blue fat lines on the right is that one on the left there. So I just, you know, there's a certain amount of studio detritus that works itself back into the work. It's very common that artists, especially painters, work this way. And this is, I think this gets a little bleached out here in the projection, but it is a square-shaped canvas, and then there's this polygon form within the stability of the square. And then the square, that white, is just gesso. It's not painted. This is another painting I really am excited about. I still really love this piece and wish that I had it. It's a detail. And then the edge, there's a very thin, thick black line that outlines that shape. I'm very interested in outlining and framing things and composition in general, but especially a framic element or a kind of physical containment formally that would happen in the work. I'm totally compositionally obsessed. I think about it all the time. In my drawing classes, I teach them negative space, and I seriously feel like I'm frothing at the mouth. I'm so excited when I'm talking about negative space. It's totally lost on those students, but I really just love it. So that's me in my studio making this painting. This is one of those crazy pictures. This photographer, her project is to take pictures of people in their studio. I really can't paint, of course, when someone's there, so I'm just looking at my painting. It's so stupid. But I love the picture because I like seeing what the painting looked like. It's interesting to see, like, you never see you and your paintings together, but they feel such a part of one. So, and my studio has really high ceilings, so it's just a kind of a very romantic shot. I think that's a little repetitive, but that's that. Again, very bleached out, but that's the, and this painting has a very thin, like, painterly circle. It's gold, it's sprayed gold. And that's a detail. So these paintings, again, this is where I'm pulling apart the shapes. They're floating in this sort of field of negative space or positive space, depending on your point of view. Very washy, very terped out paint, probably coming out of the works on paper. I'm less interested in using the body of the paint and more its liquidity. This is another one. This one was in a group show in Los Angeles, and this one also has a gold circular raised edge. It's difficult to see in this photograph, I think. And then here's another circle painting, just to kind of show you a kind of investigation of this. So the paintings are getting really empty. I'm going through a very minimal stage, pulling apart my shapes and kind of taking stock and realizing that I have this kind of alphabet that I've created, and then thinking about what is it, how does it fit together, what's the least I can do. So this was one of the least I can do paintings. This one, ironically, took 1.5 years because it wasn't about painting, it was about deciding when it was finished. So for a long time, you know, it would sit there and I wasn't quite sure if it needed something else or what. And it just took me so long to decide if it was done. And then one day I just determined that it had sat there for 7 months and I hadn't thought to do anything, so that must be finished. Because there was no urgency to do anything to it, and so that was my best way to decide. And then these were 2 pieces from a group show in New York at D'Amelio Terrace, and there's a mobile, actually, that's kind of a byproduct of some of the collage pieces, and it was a piece of cardboard I was using. I don't remember how I was using it, but it ended up having painting on both sides, and I didn't want one of those frames that came off the wall so you could see both. That just seemed so gimmicky, so I thought, well, the best way would just be to hang it. And then I liked that idea of the paintings in the corner and sort of activating the space. And then 3 is always a nice combination, and they're sort of the same color family. That's a detail of the mobile in motion. And then this is the solo show I had at Harris Lieberman Gallery in 2010. This is my first show with them. And that's that really minimal painting. Now in this instance, I have another polygon form, but I haven't left the negative space. Again, this is very bleached out. I apologize. We're trying to fix this earlier. It's just difficult with digital images and white. But the negative space actually has filled in a kind of just these strokes of very light gray. And then this painting has a very thin edge of oil paint that is the same color as the gray kind of blotchy background, but it's the edge of the painting is thick paint, like palette knifed over the edge, so it actually is like a little crusty thing. I don't know what it's like, dried toothpaste along the side or something. That's what it looks like. But again, like the painting was so light and atmospheric, it just felt like it just needed some little finishing touch, something tougher, something more visceral. And that's, you can see the edge better. This is another painting that has that crusty edge, only it's white, so it's very subtle. And then the only place it doesn't go around the edge of the picture plane is through that black triangle. This was exciting because I ended up making these really weird shapes, like that waterfall thing at the bottom right. The swimming pool shape, or I don't know what it is, but I was really excited about that wavy line. And this just shows you how thin the paint is. It's like drawing. Then this is the last painting in my lecture, and it's super hyped up here. The colors are crazy. It is a bright painting, but not like this. This is too bright. It is not a neon painting. The color in it is actually very subtle. The interactions are contrasty, but not like Disney here. And this again is a rectangle, and the composition is a kind of square, or rather a rectangle with these zigzagged edges. But if you look carefully, you can see the top ends differently than it does at the bottom. That was like a big idea. I don't know, a lot of people didn't notice it, but I like completely was, you know, into that. And then I have some details of it. Again, totally wrong color, but whatever, trust me. So yeah, like I said, that's my last image. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Or not, it's okay.
You said that you were in this process of distilling everything and kind of picking each element apart and getting alphabets. And are you just now starting to put them back together?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, I think things went back together differently, but then recently I just made another painting that isn't all put back together. But yeah, I mean, isolating the parts really changed how I thought about things. Yeah. Sometimes after filling stuff up a lot, you've got to do the reverse. It's just a natural flow. It'll probably go back again.
Seems like some of the paintings are objects and some of them are like a space. Is there any distinction in your work related to that, or is that just my, like some of them are they're more all over, and then some are actual objects, like the line, spray painted line painting is more even, and then other ones are more sections.
Yeah. Are you talking about that spray paint early one that I showed I was making with the cans on it?
Yeah, that one is a black one.
Yeah. There was a period of time, and I forgot to say this in the lecture, but I sometimes try to talk about this distinction between the paintings that were fields and then the paintings that become not about making a space that continues off of the picture plane. There was a time when I was really just trying to kind of create an environment that was all over, like an all over painting, or something that had a ground with then objects on top. And then I think I wanted something less that had to do with a literal kind of space. Like these earlier paintings, I was very concerned with a kind of projection into space, a recession into space, and then some kind of some way of articulating the literal surface plane of the painting. So that one, I think, is about that, whereas the more recent work is about not creating that or disrupting that kind of classical space making.
You mentioned a lot of art historical moments, like analytical cubism. Do you feel like that was something that sort of happened in your work and you were surprised by it, or was it like something that you were consciously thinking about?
I wasn't consciously thinking about it.
I'm wondering if you keep like any kind of records or notes about things that you get excited about, colors or shapes, or if it's all in your head and then it comes out. Is it completely spontaneous, or is there any kind of planning?
There's very little planning, because if I do too much planning, it kind of kills the idea and I become disinterested in it. So to start a painting, I need some kind of hook. Like if I don't have enough of some little kernel going, it falls apart very early on. So sometimes there may be a painting where I'm like, okay, I want to do this crazy shape here, and I want it to be blue. You know, and I think it should be this kind of blue, so I'll do that. And then after that, who knows what happens, because the blue you think you're going to make isn't that, or you find a better blue, or then you realize that blue sucks when there's that much of it, and you need to wipe it out, and then you wipe it out, and you're like, oh my God, the wipe is so interesting, what can I do? So it just starts a chain reaction, but I do need a place to start, but it can't be too detailed, and it can't be too non-specific. I work on a lot of pieces simultaneously, and I find that that works the best because there's a constant percolation of ideas and one thing leads to the next. And also there's always some unfinished business from one painting that translates into the other. So sometimes that's the genesis. But yeah, I mean, I don't really take notes. I have always had a camera. And, you know, this was like a bigger deal when cameras weren't on phones. Or, you know, there was a time not too far away, long ago, where you didn't even have a phone you could carry with you. You know, like when I was in graduate school, which I know I sound like an old person talking, but, you know, you just didn't have a cell phone, you know, and if you wanted a camera, you had this ginormous thing that was like film camera. So that's crazy, right? It's just not so long ago. It's like 15 years ago. And so I always had a camera like that in my bag, and I would be taking pictures all the time, and that was sort of my notes. And it wasn't specific. Like, I wouldn't think, I would just take pictures of anything I thought was cool and just print them and carry them. Sometimes it would be slide film, and it would just be like an archive or an encyclopedic visual notes catalog. And it wasn't like I used them for anything. It was just documenting what caught my eye, and there was no hierarchy to it. And nowadays with like an iPhone, it's awesome because you can do this, you have it, you can show it on your lecture if you want to, and you have this record, and it's so much more immediate. But I have to say I kind of use it less now than I did earlier. But yeah, so that's sort of how I do the.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between humor and your paintings?
I actually think I can't. I think that this idea of humor in my work is a problem because the way I speak about it probably encourages that read more than it's really there without me. So this is, I am normally not with my paintings, and normally I'm not talking about them. And most of the people who will ever see my paintings will never meet me or hear me speak about it. So I think that when I talk about it, a different essence comes across than the work probably it has on its own. So you probably just got a more humorous way, but it's also me having to talk about my work in front of people, which is kind of horrible. So I'm just trying to like get through it. And, you know, I've got an audience of people who I know I've got like 20 more minutes and it's already an hour, you know, so, and I'm a teacher, so I understand this idea of performance. But the humor thing is really, I suppose it's there, but I think it gets confusing when you hear me speak as opposed to just engaging in the work.
Can you talk about the role of beauty in your work?
It's another tricky one. I'm less interested in beauty, and I'm less interested in ugly. I'm more interested in this sort of in-between moment, which is something unusual, or I've used the word unconventional. I love beautiful paintings. Sometimes they're so beautiful I find them cloying, so I might not like that work as much. And I don't like ugly for ugly's sake. I think that can get tedious as well because it's just a reaction to beauty. What I'm trying to get is some combination of elements that are interesting and intriguing to look at, but hopefully not relying solely on a kind of beautiful to keep your attention.
Other than like a show time frame.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's any sense of series when you're working, or when to stop or starting a series, or whether it all just sort of flows in that vacillation way.
I think it just flows in the vacillation. I paint all the time, you know, almost every day. Probably, if I'm completely honest, it's probably 5 days out of 7. And I'm not the kind of painter who only paints when I know I have a show coming. I just paint all the time. So I think that's probably why I didn't even mention that it's interesting I didn't do that, because to me it's like all one continuum. When I do a lecture, I can see things differently because I see things compared in a timeline. I did move somewhat chronologically. It's easier to notice things in hindsight than in the moment. So I'm not sure.
What do you think the role of painting is in our culture today?
First, I hope it has a role in our culture today. I'm not so convinced. I think that isolating painting out from other mediums in terms of our culture is probably the wrong way to look at it. It's like, in American culture, it's such a travesty that art isn't taken more seriously culturally. The fact that public schools are taking art out of kindergarten, they're doing this in Los Angeles, they're doing it everywhere, music. I think there's just a big problem with American culture. We're not proud of our artists, we find fault with them, we're always thinking that they're crazy people or making controversial work and nitpicking at what we think art should be. So if I take your question just based on the art world of people who are already making work and agree that art is okay and great and valuable, I don't really know. I don't really know. I think that every artist who's, any artist who's working in their medium, that's kind of the question. If they're asking big questions, I guess you're asking yourself that, but I don't know if you have the answer. I think you're just asking the question all the time, and hopefully the work in the moment is helping to answer it. Oh, there's one more question.
When you're making these paintings, do you ever feel like you're trying to solve a puzzle, or do they just come together when you go from shape to shape?
It's definitely puzzle, especially those very complicated ones, like this one. This is a puzzle. Each part that I do, it's not pre-planned, so I just had the big external shape, which was the top of the rectangle, the bottom, and getting the zigzags drawn on. And after that, I'm drawing out the shape one day, and then the next day I'll come in and put something in that shape. So it's a chain reaction. And as I go, the more color I put down, the less colors will work. And the less shapes will work. And I'm trying not to repeat any kind of mark making. So I'm really creating a problem for myself because I'm eliminating more and more and more possible ways that the painting can work. So when I'm down to the last 5 moves, it's pretty scary, and I'm at this point where I'm the whole thing could fall apart now, and I've spent 6 weeks on this. But I actually don't even think that way. I don't say oh, you've worked 6 weeks. I don't even think that way, but that's the reality of it. So yeah, it is a puzzle.
So you find yourself wiping things away and changing colors in different spaces?
I do in the moment, when I put down a shape, or I'll make a shape, and then I kind of need to decide pretty soon if I'm going to keep it or not. Sometimes if it's just a line and I work in a thin gray line, so it's erasable or I can go over it, and if it shows through, it's no big deal. But say, for instance, that turquoise thing down the side, when the painting's finished, it doesn't look that crazy, but when I was making it, I was thinking, oh my God, how horrible would it be if I made that entire thing one connected zigzag in turquoise? That would be the most awful thing I could do. So I thought, okay, you can't do it then. You cannot do it because that's going to be terrible. And then I was just oh wow, it would be so terrible. And so then I was just well, no other ideas are presenting themselves to me, and I'm clearly fixated, so I have to indulge myself. And then I did it, and it looked horrible. So I just had to, and I was but I'm going to let it stay, because with oil paint, you can't, once it dries, you can't, or I could go into it, but then I'd lose the luminosity, and it's all about that light touch. So when you're working in a light touch, it's a one-shot thing. So I left it, and I just was okay, yeah, just throw it away and make a new one if it doesn't work, So I left it, and once everything else got put in around it, it settled in. And then I think since that was early on, I could do things in the painting that kind of tempered that crazy edge, kind of, balanced it out or put it in context.
That's okay. You don't actually explain the question I have, but that's what's so hard about making these paintings, because you can't really go backwards.
Yeah.
You know, this is it really, especially the new paintings, which are so thin.
Yeah.
With the water, that you have to be right there in the moment and just disappear.
Yeah.
It's really tough. So you don't have that much time to take out.
I know, they look like they're just kind of, but they're not. It's a lot of thinking, I've spent, I think 2011 was a year of a lot of thinking. So yeah, no, it's hard, but that's the mania.
But so are you making the really active full paintings at the same time you're making the really reductive ones? Do you kind of balance that out?
Well, for a while the really reductive ones were the only ones I was making, and there wasn't one like, say, this one. But now I do, like this one was 2011, and I have another one that I'm working on right now that is very formally different. It's like things, but it is dense again, but in a different way. And I do like to work on different things simultaneously, which I think has been, I think that's caused reception issues with my work, but, whatever.
Can you say more about that?
About what?
Can you say more about that?
About reception issues?
Yeah, working simultaneously on different bodies of work and...
Well, I guess I wouldn't call it different bodies of work. To me, it all feels very connected, but I know that I know this because of awkward studio visits where people come over and they're like, and I know, I can see their little brain going, who told me to come here again? Why didn't I look her up first? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I'm just find it, there are artists I love who make the same painting over and over, like Mondrian, tweak, 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 I love that. Ryman, not such a good example, but there are people who just are tweaking a signature style, and I love their work, but I cannot make that work. I get bored. I need things, opposition, contrast, and when I found my work, or I started on the path that was my work, that was the thing that was there for me, and realized that was what stimulated me. And so, not everybody's gonna get it. Some people will take them longer to get it. Some people will never get it. What are you gonna do? Everything's like that. So I just, the point is, not everyone's gonna like your work, and you really don't want everybody to like your work. You don't want to make the kind of work that everybody likes. That's probably pretty bad work. So it's okay. And it takes a while to learn that and figure that out, but at a certain point you kind of learn this stuff, and a lot of stuff just doesn't bother you as much. It's like you have bigger problems. So.
Well, let's give her a hand. Thanks so much.
Thanks.